One summer, my younger brother Kyle, who had been living in South America for 3 years, wrote to me. During his time there, he had successfully started a small business and found a girlfriend whom he planned to marry. Before this, Kyle had always preferred casual relationships and avoid emotional attachments. In his postcard, he mentioned visiting us for a week or two if possible. Unlike Kyle, I had been married for many years. My wife, Marie, and I had two wonderful sons, Michael, 15, and Sammy, 12. They shared similar interests and got along well, though they occasionally teased each other. Marie often remarked how unusual this was compared to other families with boys, who usually dealt with frequent fights. I credited our parenting, inspired by the peaceful upbringing our parents gave Kyle and me. At dinner, I informed my family about Kyle's visit. Everyone was excited, though the boys weren't thrilled about sharing a room during his stay. Sammy was more accepting, but Michael, at his age, valued his personal space. After dinner, I had a talk with Michael, and he eventually agreed to compromise for a short time. On the day Kyle's flight arrived, I went to the airport early. Watching the bustling crowd, I had an odd sense that something was off in the world. The thought quickly passed when I saw Kyle waving at me. I rushed to hug him, realizing how much I had missed him in 3 years. To my surprise, he wasn't alone. Beside him stood a young, beautiful Latin American woman, his wife, Ruth. Though I'd seen her in photos, this was our first time meeting in person. They had a quiet, intimate wedding we couldn't attend. None of that mattered. I was just happy to see my brother. When we arrived home, Marie had prepared a festive dinner, and the children eagerly welcomed their uncle. Kyle brought gifts for everyone and introduced us to a local spirit from South America, which he claimed was unlike anything we'd ever tried. The evening was filled with laughter, food, and conversation. After the kids went to their room with their new toys, the adults stayed up chatting and enjoying Kyle's strong homemade spirit. Soon, the mood became relaxed, too relaxed. Kyle began complimenting Marie excessively, which made me uncomfortable. However, I brushed it off as the alcohol talking. As the night progressed, I felt drowsy and eventually passed out on the living room couch. I woke up later with a pounding headache and decided to move to the bedroom. The house was quiet, and I stumbled in the dark, trying not to wake anyone. When I entered my bedroom, I saw Marie lying in bed, facing away from me. Not wanting to disturb her, I lay down beside her. Suddenly, I heard a soft moan and instinctively placed my hand on her side to comfort her. But when she turned to face me, I froze. The voice that spoke wasn't Marie's. Startled, I switched on the nightlamp. To my shock, it wasn't my wife lying next to me. It was Ruth, wearing a thin shirt and looking entirely at ease. "What are you doing here?" I exclaimed, jumping out of bed. Ruth, calm and unbothered, replied, "What's wrong? We all drank a lot. Your wife is probably sleeping somewhere else. Just lie down and sleep. We'll figure it out in the morning." Ignoring her, I rushed out to find Marie. My thoughts were clouded by the lingering effects of alcohol, but I couldn't ignore the situation. I searched the house, eventually finding Marie asleep in the guest room meant for Kyle. "Marie, wake up," I said, gently shaking her. She stirred and looked at me, surprised. "Brian, what's wrong?" she asked groggily. "Why are you here? Do you know what's going on?" Marie, still half asleep, shrugged it off as a result of too much drinking. She suggested we go back to our room. Together, we returned to the bedroom, where Ruth was still lounging. Marie politely escorted her out, but I couldn't shake my concern about Kyle's whereabouts. After ensuring the boys were asleep, I went outside for fresh air and found Kyle on the porch, lost in thought. "What happened tonight?" I asked. Kyle explained that he and Ruth had argued. She must have accidentally entered the wrong room, while he stayed up drinking alone. Though his explanation made sense, I couldn't help but feel uneasy about the events of the night. It was a warm summer evening when my younger brother, Kyle, who had been living in South America for the past 3 years, wrote to me. He had not only built a small business, but also found a girlfriend with whom he planned to formalize a relationship. Before this, Kyle had always preferred casual relationships, avoiding attachments. Now he was coming home for a visit, bringing his fiancée, Ruth, along. Unlike Kyle, I had been married for years to my wife, Marie. We had 2 sons, Michael, 15, and Sammy, 12. Though they were close in age, they rarely fought, a fact Marie found surprising compared to the frequent arguments she observed among her friends' children. When I shared the news of Kyle's visit over dinner, everyone was thrilled. The only concern was that the boys would have to share a room during his stay. Sammy accepted the arrangement easily, but Michael, being older and craving his own space, was less enthusiastic. I spoke to him afterward, and he agreed to the temporary arrangement. The day of Kyle's arrival was a mix of anticipation and nostalgia. I arrived early at the airport and waited, watching the bustling crowd. Something felt oddly different that day, though I couldn't place why. Soon Kyle appeared, waving with his trademark enthusiasm. Beside him stood a strikingly beautiful young woman, his fiancée, Ruth. Back home, Marie had prepared a feast to welcome our guests. Kyle brought gifts, including local spirits from South America. The evening unfolded with lively chatter and laughter. However, Kyle's behavior began to irk me. His compliments toward Marie felt overly familiar, but I attributed his looseness to the alcohol. Later that night, after the drinks had taken their toll, I found myself disoriented. I awoke on the couch, head pounding, and stumbled to bed. To my shock, the person in my bed wasn't Marie. It was Ruth. Though she seemed unperturbed, I was mortified. Determined to find answers, I searched the house and eventually found Marie asleep in the guest room. The following day, everything seemed normal on the surface, but an unease lingered. Michael, sensing my mood, revealed a prank he and Sammy had pulled. They had hidden a camera in their room to observe Ruth, out of boyish curiosity. Curious and uneasy, I retrieved the footage. What I saw shattered my world. The video revealed Kyle and Marie in a compromising conversation, discussing an affair they had years ago and insinuating plans to rekindle it. My heart sank as I realized the depth of their betrayal. Rage consumed me. I confronted Kyle, suggesting a drive to talk privately. Once we were alone, I confronted him about the affair. Instead of remorse, Kyle smirked, which enraged me further. Our argument escalated into a physical altercation. Years of anger and betrayal exploded in that moment as we fought, exchanging blows. Kyle lay unconscious on the ground after our fight, and I, exhausted and emotionally drained, sank to the ground, leaning against the car. For a moment, I wished I could forget everything, but the truth wouldn't leave me. After sitting there for several minutes, I got back into the car. Kyle was still out cold, and I didn't bother to wake him. Leaving him there, I drove back home, though I had no desire to return. I knew unresolved matters awaited me. Upon arriving, I handed the boys some pocket money and asked them to spend the day outside. Michael was surprised by my sudden generosity, but he seemed to understand and took Sammy with him, saying they'd be back closer to the evening. With the boys gone, I called Marie and asked her to come home immediately. She began asking questions, but I didn't answer. I just told her to hurry. Then I turned to Ruth. I found her in the living room, casually flipping through a magazine, her composure unsettlingly calm. I sat across from her, determined to get answers. Ruth, tell me honestly, how well do you know my brother? What really connects you two? And don't give me that pure and innocent feelings nonsense, I said firmly. She looked up from the magazine, her ever-present smile not wavering. What are you talking about? She asked, feigning innocence. You know exactly what I mean. Last night, I saw you and Kyle arguing before Marie came to his room. What were you fighting about? Ruth sighed and stood, walking to the window. You really want the truth? She asked, staring out at the street. Yes, I said. Well, your brother isn't exactly the saint you think he is. Do you know what he was really doing in Brazil? I was taken aback. Of course I do. He told me he was running a business. She turned to face me, smirking. Business? Try drug dealing. He got caught and spent 2.5 years in prison. That's where we met. He was already planning his next move by then. I was stunned. You're lying. Kyle would have told me. Just like he told you about his affair with Marie, she shot back, her smile now mocking. The room felt like it was spinning. Ruth continued, Kyle came here to retrieve something he claims belongs to him. Your grandfather's coin collection. He didn't bring me because he loves me. He just wanted to show off. There was no wedding, by the way. He's been lying to everyone, including me. She walked back to the couch, sat down, and crossed her legs. Well, now that his little secret is out, I suppose I'll pack my things. I've had enough of this charade, and you're just going to leave him? I asked, still trying to process everything. Why not? There's nothing left for me here, she said with a shrug, then walked out of the room to pack. When Marie arrived home, Ruth had already left. My anger and despair boiled over as I confronted my wife. She barely had time to ask what was wrong before I slapped her, sending her to the floor. Brian, what are you doing? She cried, tears streaming down her face. How could you? I yelled. I loved you. I gave you everything. How long have you been cheating on me with Kyle? How long? Are the boys even mine? Marie sobbed, unable to meet my eyes. I'm sorry, she whispered. Sorry? That's all you have to say. I grabbed her arm and pulled her to the couch, forcing her to sit. I glared at her, waiting for an explanation, but none came. Before I could say more, the front door slammed and heavy footsteps echoed through the house. It was Kyle. He stormed into the living room, his clothes disheveled and streaked with dirt and blood. Marie flinched at his appearance, but I stood my ground. Listen, bro, he began, his voice insincere. I know I was wrong. Forgive me. I just couldn't resist your wife. Don't you dare talk about her. I roared, advancing on him. Why did you come here, Kyle? No more lies. I already know everything, including what Ruth told me. Kyle smirked. So, she spilled the beans, huh? Figures. Well, fine. I'll be straight with you. I've always envied you. Dad loved you more. You always got everything. The best of everything, even Grandpa's inheritance. I came here to take what should have been mine. Nothing here belongs to you, I said, punching him hard. A brutal fight ensued, and amidst the blows, I demanded answers. Kyle admitted he wanted to hurt me, to make me feel unloved and less deserving than him. His envy had festered for years, and this was his way of lashing out. When the fight ended, Kyle slumped into a chair, bruised and battered. I looked at him, seeing not the brother I had grown up with, but a broken, bitter man consumed by jealousy. Despite everything, a small part of me still pitied him. The night felt endless as I sat on the ground, leaning against the car, exhausted beyond words. I just wanted to escape the storm of emotions inside me. A few minutes later, I managed to pull myself together and return to the car. Kyle was still unconscious. I didn't bother trying to revive him. Leaving him there, I drove back home, though the thought of going home didn't bring any solace either. There were unresolved matters waiting for me. When I arrived, I handed some pocket money to the boys and suggested they go for a walk and take their time coming back. My older son looked surprised by my sudden generosity, but after a moment of hesitation, he seemed to understand and left with his younger brother. They promised they'd be back in the evening. Once they were gone, I called my wife, Marie, and told her to return home urgently. She began asking questions, wanting to know what had happened, but I didn't offer any explanation. I just repeated my request firmly. Then, I turned my attention to Ruth. It was time to confront her. Something about her calm demeanor amidst all the chaos didn't sit right with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more than she had let on. "Ruth," I began, sitting across from her in the living room while she casually flipped through a magazine on the couch. "Tell me honestly, how well do you know my brother? What exactly connects you two? And don't try to convince me it's some innocent, pure relationship." She glanced up at me, her usual smile still plastered on her face. "What are you talking about?" she asked, feigning innocence. "You know exactly what I mean," I snapped. "Did you know Marie was meeting with Kyle tonight? You were with him not long before that. What were you arguing about?" "Oh, so you heard us? Why even ask, then?" Ruth said, her voice laced with amusement. "Kyle warned me about that drink. Said it wasn't your league." "Don't mess with me," I said firmly. "Answer my question. Did you know he was meeting Marie?" "I knew," she admitted with a shrug. "So what?" "He told me about it back in Brazil." She got up and walked to the window, looking out into the night. "Did you even know who your brother really was?" she asked without turning to face me. "What do you mean?" I replied, "I grew up with him. Of course, I knew him." "Blind faith in family," she said with a hint of sarcasm. "Let me guess. He didn't tell you about Mary or about his time in Brazil, did he? He got involved with drugs there. Thought he could run that business. It didn't work out. They caught him, and he spent 2.5 years in prison." I was stunned. "You're lying," I said, though her words were beginning to make sense in light of recent events. "Oh, am I?" she shot back. "Just like he told you about his affair with Mary, right? We met before he was released, and he convinced me to try my luck with him. Things went well for him after that, but he made enemies. Dangerous ones. That's why he's here now. He's desperate, Brian, and he's using everyone around him, including me." I sat there, overwhelmed, as Ruth packed her things. "You wonder why you weren't invited to the wedding? There wasn't one," she said with a smirk before leaving the house. When Marie finally arrived, I couldn't contain my anger any longer. I confronted her, demanding answers. She admitted to her affair with Kyle, but swore that our children were mine. She pleaded for forgiveness, blaming Kyle's threats for her actions. Before I could respond, Kyle stormed into the room, dirt and blood staining his clothes. He claimed he was here for the coins our grandfather had left behind. "You always had everything," he said bitterly. "I just want what's mine." I threw the box of coins at him, letting him take the fake copies I had made years ago. As he left, I turned to Marie and told her to pack her things. Our trust was broken beyond repair. A month later, Kyle called, furious that the coins were worthless. I told him his misfortune stemmed not from the coins, but from his greed and betrayal. As for the real coins, they remained buried under our grandfather's tombstone, where they belonged. After Kyle and Marie were gone, I sat down with my children and told them the truth. I hoped they would learn from the mistakes of those around them and never let greed or deceit poison their lives. While they worked out their issues after speaking with Mom, Dad contacted my brother and me to deliver the news. Initially, we were taken aback, assuming it was a prank. When the reality of the situation sank in, I found myself shedding tears. Since then, Mom has been emotionally devastated. Over the past week, she has driven to every campground in the area, searching for Dad. She has covered more than 1,800 miles. While my brother and I are aware of Dad's whereabouts, we've made a promise not to share this information with her. Both my brother and I fully support Dad in this ordeal and want to honor his wishes as the one wronged in this situation. However, we're deeply concerned about Mom's well-being. She's not eating or sleeping, driving around frantically in her attempts to locate Dad. We're afraid she might get into an accident, suffer a heart attack, or even pose a danger to herself, given her repeated statements about not wanting to go on without Dad. Now, we're grappling with a dilemma. Should my brother and I disclose Dad's location to alleviate Mom's distress? My stance is that we shouldn't, as Dad explicitly requested his privacy. Sharing his location could erode his trust in us. We should respect his plea for privacy. One option could be to inform Mom of Dad's location with the assurance that she wouldn't approach him. This might offer her some solace, yet there's a risk of harming our rapport with Dad if he discovers it. Our priority is to stand by Dad, who was taken by surprise due to his wife's actions, and to uphold his trust. Our obligation is to honor Dad's wish while extending our support to him. I understand that we should fully back Dad, as Mom's actions led to the situation, and she must now confront the repercussions. Yesterday evening, Mom was in the St. George area searching for Dad. For those unfamiliar, St. George is in southwest Utah. I convinced Mom to drive up to our house and stay with us for a few nights. She agreed and is expected to arrive this afternoon. Over the past 10 days, the situation has significantly changed. Mom came to my house looking visibly distressed and mentioned feeling unwell. We had a brief conversation. Everyone greeted her, and then we let her rest in one of the bedrooms. An hour later, my youngest daughter started screaming for me to come to the bedroom. When I arrived, I found Mom bent over in pain, clutching her lower abdomen and pelvic area. She was immobilized, so my husband carried her to the car and we rushed her to the emergency room. She was in extreme pain, sweating profusely, and appeared to have a high fever. At the hospital, the doctor suspected some kind of infection, possibly a urinary tract infection, and ordered tests. They also treated her severe dehydration. It turned out that Mom had contracted a sexually transmitted disease from the man she had been involved with. Fortunately, it was one that could be cured with antibiotics. The doctor suggested that Mom stay overnight in the hospital until her fever subsided and her overall condition improved. However, even after 48 hours, there was no noticeable change. This is when the situation took a turn for the worse. The doctor mentioned the possibility of her having a drug-resistant form of the STD, which has been spreading in recent years. They put her on a combination of powerful antibiotics. After 5 days, her fever finally broke, and her condition stabilized. She was discharged from the hospital yesterday. Throughout her hospital stay, Mom repeatedly inquired about Dad. She wanted to know if he had reached out to check on her. I told her the truth. He hadn't made any calls, not even once, but that I was providing him with daily updates. My family and I visited her multiple times every day to ensure she wasn't alone for extended periods. However, this caused her to become extremely saddened. Now back at our home, Mom appears to be recovering physically. She has been sending numerous texts and making frequent calls to Dad. Out of frustration, she expressed, after being together for 40 years, you'd think he'd at least communicate with me. Hearing this, I was so angry that I lost control and said, if you hadn't messed around, none of this would have happened. This is all your fault. You've torn the family apart. Although this statement held undeniable truth, I immediately regretted saying it and apologized to her. She broke down and started crying, clinging to me. We talked for more than 2 hours, and she finally opened up. It turns out that the man she had been involved with was a 28-year-old construction worker. He, along with 2 friends, had rented a trailer by the river for 6 months instead of staying in a hotel. Mom confessed to being enticed by his advances, leading her to make a choice she deeply regretted. Reflecting on this and sharing it with you gives me a queasy feeling. I'm so thankful she confessed to Dad. Poor Dad. Imagine if she hadn't and ended up passing the STD to him. That would have been devastating. Our journey hit a bump when Miley's dad expressed his concerns about our relationship. He strongly wanted his daughter to marry a wealthy businessman, which posed a challenge for us. When I visited their home, I was surprised when Miley's father had the nerve to belittle me, calling me an average guy. He even insulted my financial situation, showing disapproval of his daughter marrying someone he considered to have a low income. It was painful as he compared my earnings to Miley's beauty, like she was a Hollywood actress. Even though I worked as a brand manager at a respected marketing agency and earned a decent income, his shallow comments angered me. I stood my ground, expressing my disappointment and reminding him that true value goes beyond money. Despite his self-centered behavior, Miley handled the situation well, showing her loyalty by supporting me and confronting her father. She chose to leave her parents' home and start a new chapter with me. Just a week later, we had a small ceremony to celebrate our marriage and exchange vows, which made us very happy. Having such an understanding and supportive partner like my wife brought me immense joy. Miley intentionally invited only her mother, excluding her father from the guest list. Our first year of marriage was filled with happiness and satisfaction. However, as time went on, I started noticing certain behaviors in Miley that resembled those of her father. Growing up, her parents had given her a lot of love, which led to her feeling entitled. She often demanded to be treated like royalty and expected me to follow her wishes without question. Any disagreement I had was dismissed as just an argument, and she expected me to obey her without hesitation. While shopping for furniture for our home, I realized that Miley didn't value my opinions. She consistently ignored my suggestions. When I mentioned that I preferred white sofas over green ones, she blew it out of proportion and got upset. Her tendency to get angry and throw fits over small things became clear. Once, I accidentally bought chocolate ice cream instead of her favorite blueberry flavor, and she burst into tears. It was evident she wasn't used to hearing the word no. Without a job or career, she spent most of her time hanging out with friends and shopping. I realized that Miley had inherited her father's traits, but I wasn't willing to give in or blindly follow her demands. I told her that as a married couple, I had the right to express my opinions and expected her to act maturely if we wanted to have a successful marriage. I communicated that lacking mutual understanding and respect would make our marriage unworkable. Miley was surprised by my statement, as she had never heard the word no before. Overwhelmed with emotions, she cried and sincerely promised to change her ways. Even though it was unfamiliar territory for her, she was committed to trying earnestly due to her deep love for me. Acknowledging her father's influence on her spoiled behavior, I chose to give her a chance for personal growth. Driven by my love for her, Miley began taking gradual steps to show her commitment to patience and kindness toward me. She got a part-time job and enrolled in a course to contribute to our lives responsibly rather than solely socializing with friends. She made an effort to join me when we met our mutual friends, Noah and his wife, Emily. While Emily had been Miley's friend since childhood, she contrasted significantly in personality and demeanor. Emily presented herself as composed, mature, and intelligent, creating a sharp distinction from Miley's previous behavior. As Noah was my closest friend, we frequently collaborated on various business ideas. This led to us visiting each other's homes often. With our strong dedication and hard work, Noah and I successfully launched our product, resulting in significant financial gains. We went from living in cramped apartments to roomy, cozy houses, making a big improvement in our living situation. When my father-in-law heard about my achievements, he started seeing me in a better light and began casually calling me. At first, I was hesitant to interact with him, but after Emily and Noah encouraged me to forgive the past and move forward, I chose to pick up his calls. Over time, I grew more comfortable with the idea and invited my in-laws to our new home. When my father-in-law accepted the invitation and saw our luxurious house, he was surprised by how well things were going for me, as he never expected my success. His mistreatment and bad behavior actually motivated me to work hard for success. However, he kept pushing both Miley and me to have kids, despite our own feelings and choices. Ironically, the same person who initially didn't want us to be together now suddenly wanted us to have children. Realizing he was intruding in our lives, I kept a reasonable distance from him. However, just last Christmas, Miley's parents strongly suggested that we throw a big dinner at our house and include a wide range of guests. In response, I invited Noah's family, my own parents, and my brothers, creating a sense of togetherness and celebration. Miley's parents also wanted me to invite their friends and relatives to the Christmas dinner as they hadn't been present at our wedding. It became clear that they weren't only interested in introducing me to their acquaintances, but also in showing off their connections in our fancy house and wealth. Despite what they wanted, I chose to keep the guest list smaller for a more intimate gathering. However, Miley did invite a few of her parents' friends and relatives to the Christmas dinner party. My parents and Noah's family came dressed nicely and appropriately for the occasion. I was surprised, though, when Miley's family arrived in very formal and extravagant outfits that seemed more suited for a wedding than a casual get-together. To my astonishment, some of my in-laws' friends and relatives acted as if they were in their own home, dancing and using our space without any restraint. Miley wore a short black dress, and the lively atmosphere turned our house into a bustling party that felt more like a bar than a traditional Christmas dinner. This strong difference from our usual calm and simple family gatherings made me feel uncomfortable. Seeing how things were going, my parents, who preferred a quieter atmosphere, chose to leave early. They could tell that the gathering was turning into something more like a disco than a traditional Christmas celebration. As the night went on, my father-in-law was busy showing off our house, cars, and other possessions to his friends while other guests joined Miley on the dance floor. Meanwhile, Noah's family and I stayed focused on enjoying our dinner and didn't pay much attention to these unfamiliar guests. After we ate, Noah and Emily decided to leave early, feeling they had done their part for the evening. Feeling really unhappy with how the party was going, I talked to Miley about how frustrated I was and said we needed to wrap it up. Miley understood and told me to go upstairs and rest while she took care of things. With a pounding headache and growing annoyance at Miley, her parents, and their strange friends, I locked myself in my room and tried to find some comfort in sleep. I woke up around 3 a.m. from a bad dream and noticed that Miley wasn't in bed next to me. Curious, I went downstairs to see what was going on. I was shocked and grew angrier when I saw that the whole house was dark with no lights on. The shocking truth awaited me when I found that the previous guests were still relaxing on the carpets and sofas, seemingly not bothered by the late hour. Discovering this made me even more furious. I got angrier when I couldn't find Miley or her parents in the main living areas, so I started searching in other rooms. Eventually, I found her parents sleeping in our designated guest room. Feeling more worried, I decided to call Miley's phone to see where she was. I heard her ringtone coming from another guest room. Something didn't feel right, so I hung up quickly and carefully went into the room to see what was happening. When I opened the door, I was shocked to see Miley alone in the room with a man I didn't know, doing something very inappropriate. I was so angry and couldn't believe it. I grabbed my phone and recorded a video of what I saw. In a burst of anger, I confronted Miley, splashing water on her. She was surprised to see me because she probably thought I was asleep and wouldn't find out until the morning. I punched the guy and kicked him out of my house, yelling and causing a scene. When Miley's parents and the other guests woke up from the commotion, Miley's father explained that there was a misunderstanding and the guy was a friend's son. When Miley cried and begged me for another chance, I told him to be quiet and slapped her. Yet her father kept trying to explain things away, making the situation seem less serious and hinting that I was overreacting. His attitude of entitlement became more obvious now that I was wealthy, as he was shocked by the idea of me leaving his daughter. He suggested that we wait until morning to deal with it as a family matter so we wouldn't cause a scene in front of our guests. I had reached my limit and didn't care about the guests or my unfaithful wife anymore, so I firmly asked everyone to leave my house, even though it was very late at night. After that, I took the necessary steps to end my marriage by sending divorce papers to Miley. The process of finalizing the divorce took months, during which Noah and my other friends supported me. Sadly, my greedy father-in-law tried to manipulate and get money from me, but luckily I had strong evidence of his daughter's unfaithfulness, which helped me. Even though Miley kept asking for another chance, admitting her affairs and feeling sorry, I stayed firm in my decision. She tried to blame her father and thought I would forgive her easily, but I knew she needed to take responsibility for her actions in order to truly grow. Initially, I had given her chances because of her entitled behavior from how she was raised, but her cheating on me was a big betrayal of trust that I couldn't ignore. Forgiving infidelity is hard for me because I believe it's a choice people make. Miley is an adult and knew what she was doing, so she needs to own up to it. It was clear that Miley had a strained relationship with her parents, partly because of the big difference between the life she had with me and how she grew up. Even though Miley keeps trying to reach out to me, I've made up my mind. There's no chance for us to get back together. I'm happy now. I'm in a relationship with Noah's sister, and I genuinely like how things are. Sometimes being alone is much better than being around people who act greedy and entitled. People like that don't match up with my values and can mess up any sense of peace or harmony in life.